All right, good afternoon. Just a programming note, I think you know there is a Security Council meeting this afternoon on maintenance of international peace and security, children, technology, and education in conflict. First meeting to be held under the presidency of the United States in the month of March. From our part, Rosemary DiCarlo, the Undersecretary General for the Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, will brief council members. Turning to the situation in the Middle East. Over the past 48 hours or so, the Secretary General has been in touch with a number of regional leaders. Just a few minutes ago, he spoke by phone with His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, the Emir of the State of Qatar. The Secretary General reiterated his condemnation of the recent attacks against Qatar, which is in violation of the country's sovereignty and territorial integrity. He also reaffirmed Qatar's role as a strong and valued partner of the United Nations. The Secretary General and the Emir discussed the situation in the region and the urgent need to end the current military escalation and a return to dialogue in the interest of regional stability. Over the weekend, he also spoke with the Foreign Minister of the Sultanate of Oman, His Excellency Badr bin Hamad Al Busaidi. The Secretary General praised Oman for its efforts on mediating a peaceful negotiations and reiterated his condemnation of the attacks against Iran and the Iranian attacks on Gulf countries. The Secretary General and the Foreign Minister both expressed concern about the risk posed by this war for the region. The Secretary General also over the weekend had a number of conversations with ambassadors from the Gulf Cooperation Council, and we'll keep you up to date as to further contacts he may have. As far as the situation on the ground, the position expressed by the Secretary General on Saturday in the Security Council remains very much valid. What is needed now in the region more than anything is a way out. To that end, the Secretary General again calls for de-escalation, an immediate cessation of hostilities, and genuine dialogue and negotiations in line with the Charter of the United Nations. The risk of a humanitarian fallout in the region is also growing fast. Our OCHA colleagues are in touch with our various UN country teams in the region and are ready to respond swiftly as needed. The Secretary General is particularly concerned about the growing numbers of civilians we are seeing being killed and the destruction of civilian infrastructure. International humanitarian law is clear. Civilians must be protected at all times, and civilian infrastructure must be protected as well. The expansion of attacks to countries that were not involved in the initial attack is, according to the Secretary General, particularly worrying, whether we're talking about Gulf countries, Jordan, Syria, or Lebanon. In Lebanon, where we have both a political and peacekeeping presence, tensions are also rising. We're seriously concerned about the exchange of fire across the blue line. The situation on the ground is evolving rapidly, and we're monitoring developments closely. We're also aware that of the strikes aimed at Israel claimed by Hezbollah and the Israeli strikes that have reportedly resulted in 31 fatalities and many more injured north of the Blue Line in Lebanon. We urge utmost restraint and call on the parties to uphold the cessation of hostilities agreement. Both the Special Coordinator for Lebanon, Janine Hennis-Plasschaert, and the UNIFIL Head of Mission and Force Commander, Major General Abanyara, are engaging with the parties to de-escalate and preserve stability across the Blue Line. Our UNIFIL peacekeepers there are remaining in position despite the challenging circumstances. We're also worried about the negative impacts that the military activities in the region as a whole could have on the world economy, and those impacts would, as they often do, hit the most vulnerable the hardest. A couple of related items from our friends at UN agencies. The UN Refugee Agency said it is deeply concerned about the escalation of the conflict and its impact on civilians and further displacement in the region. Many affected countries already host millions of refugees and internally displaced people. Further violence risks overwhelming humanitarian capacity and placing additional pressure on host communities. UNICEF said it is deeply concerned by reports of strikes in Iran and across the region, illustrating the grave danger for children There are also reports of schools being struck in Iran, including a girls' school in Minab in southern Iran. Scores of students have reportedly been killed and others injured. UNICEF echoes the call of the Secretary General for the immediate cessation of hostilities and de-escalation. And our colleague Volker Turk, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, in a statement issued out of Geneva, reminded all parties that international law with respect to armed conflict is very clear. The protection of civilians is paramount. Each and every actor involved must ensure compliance with these laws. Violations of them must lead to accountability for those responsible. And Rafael Grossi, the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, spoke at his agency's Board of Governors meeting today and said that according to the Regional Safety Monitoring Network, no elevation of radiation levels above the usual background levels have been detected in countries bordering Iran. Regarding the status of the nuclear installations in Iran, up to now, he said he has no indication that any nuclear installations, including the Bushehr nuclear power plant and the Tehran research reactor, or any nuclear fuel cycle facilities have been damaged or hit. Mr. Grossi reiterated his call on the parties to exercise maximum restraint and avoid further escalation. He said the lasting solution to this long-existing discord lies in the diplomatic table and that IAEA will be there ready to play its indispensable part whenever and wherever it is called. Turning to the situation in Gaza, and our colleagues at OCHA said the regional escalation that began over the weekend is already affecting people and disrupting humanitarian services. As you know, Israeli authorities have closed all crossings, including Rafah, and have suspended humanitarian movements in and near areas where Israeli troops remain deployed in Gaza, and they've also postponed planned rotation for our humanitarian personnel. Medical evacuations and the return of people into Gaza have also been suspended as a result. People in Gaza, as you know, rely on a steady flow of humanitarian commercial goods from outside, given the limited storage capacity and destruction across this war-torn area. We and our partners had worked hard to maintain sustained and predictable flow of supplies despite the continuing restrictions, but that cannot continue under a full blockade. It is imperative that all crossings be reopened as soon as possible. In recent days, our partners have been forced to ration fuel, prioritize life-saving operations, albeit at reduced capacity, as our local stocks are going down. This includes bakeries, hospitals, desalination plants, all impacted. Services such as solid waste collection have been suspended. UN officials are working to secure the urgent resumption of fuel deliveries, which of course remains a priority, as without fuel there's very little we can do. In some areas of Gaza City, reduced water production has left people with little as 2 liters of drinking water per day. Prices of basic commodities are already rising. And in the West Bank, Israeli forces have kept most checkpoints closed, largely preventing travel between Palestinian cities and governorates. This is, of course, having an immediate impact on Palestinians' access to livelihoods, basic services, and humanitarian operations. Since the weekend, people across the West Bank have been exposed to debris falling over civilian areas among missiles and interceptor fire, while residential areas in Gaza have been exposed to continued strikes from the air, land, and sea. International humanitarian law is clear, as we keep saying every day and often many times a day. Civilians must be protected and their essential needs met, including through unimpeded entry, movement, and distribution of humanitarian assistance. Turning to another horrific humanitarian situation that we're trying to keep on the front burner, and that is Sudan, where we continue to be very worried over the escalating violence in the states of Kordofan and Blue Nile, where intensified fighting continues to harm civilians, and with it disrupting the delivery of much-needed humanitarian and life-saving assistance. According to local sources, drone attacks have intensified in El Obeid, the capital of North Kordofan, since last Friday. The Sudan Doctors Network, which has been very reliable in terms of information, reported that yesterday a medical facility was impacted. 12 people, including 5 medical staff, were injured. Meanwhile, in South Kordofan, clashes continue in and around Dilling. Fighting along key supply routes continue to disrupt commercial traffic and humanitarian operations. In Blue Nile State, there have been intensive drone attacks in the town of Kurmuk over the past 2 weeks. A school was allegedly destroyed, while electricity station was damaged. By Saturday, 1,000 families have been displaced from the locality of Kurmuk in the city of Damazin due to ongoing insecurity. OCHA reports that conditions are dire and people urgently need aid. And they are working with our partners to scale up assistance in as much as they can do. Just to give you an example of the dire conditions in some parts of Sudan, our OCHA colleagues recently visited Ed Dain Hospital in East Darfur, the hospital, which handles up to 200 outpatient consultations and 15 surgical deliveries daily for people in the Darfur and Kordofan region, faces funding shortfalls that could put essential services at risk. Meanwhile, a large fire in the Kalma camp in Yala in South Darfur destroyed about 700 homes. This comes amid worsening humanitarian conditions and major gaps in services following the suspension of some activities in January. The camp is also facing a growing measles outbreak, and OCHA is mobilizing partners in order to respond. We call on all parties to protect civilians and civilian infrastructure, ensure rapid and unhindered humanitarian access, and uphold international humanitarian law. Sustained, flexible funding is urgently needed to maintain life-saving services and prevent further deterioration. Just south of there, in South Sudan, our peacekeepers there are sounding the alarm over a sharp escalation of violence in Bimonom, in the Ruweng administrative area. According to our peacekeepers, UNMISS, a group of armed youth stormed the Abinom County headquarters on Sunday morning, wounding at least 23 people. As tensions spiraled, peacekeepers opened their gates and are now sheltering more than 1,000 civilians inside their base while providing emergency medical care for the injured. The mission is gravely concerned by reports that dozens of civilians, along with local officials, may have been killed in the clashes. We call on all parties to halt the violence immediately and resolve this through dialogue. Meanwhile, peacekeepers remain on the ground, doing everything within their mandate, trying to protect those who are seeking refuge. At the same time, peacekeepers themselves are coming under threat. We join our peacekeeping colleagues in condemning the ambush on Sunday by armed groups on a peacekeeping convoy along the border between Jonglei State and the Greater Pibor administrative area. The convoy was stopped at an unauthorized roadblock and subsequently came under fire. Peacekeepers responded in self-defense in line with their mandate and their rules of engagement. Thankfully, no UN personnel was injured. The mission has called on authorities to swiftly investigate and bring those responsible to justice. And turning to the situation between Afghanistan and Pakistan, our colleagues at the UN mission in Afghanistan tell us that cross-border clashes between the de facto authority forces in Afghanistan and Pakistani security forces are ongoing today. The mission reiterated its call to a halt in the fighting and also called on all parties to comply with their obligations under international law, including international humanitarian law, to protect civilians. In line with its Security Council mandate, the mission continues to document incidents of civilian casualties inside Afghanistan. From late February 26 to March 1st, the UN mission recorded at least 123 civilian casualties in Afghanistan, with 34 people killed and 89 injured, including women and children. These figures remain preliminary. Restrictions on movements in the border area due to the active conflict have reduced the capacity of humanitarian agencies and their partners to deliver life-saving and other assistance in the most affected area, leaving Afghan returnees from Pakistan particularly vulnerable. The UN mission notes that humanitarian medical facilities, including the emergency hospital at the Torkham border post and the IOM Transit Center, have also been damaged. For its part, the World Food Programme has paused its activities in the affected areas, with approximately 160,000 people impacted by the suspension of food distribution. Several of the provinces impacted by the fighting are experiencing critical levels of acute malnutrition. The UN mission warns that on Afghanistan's western border with Iran, a potential increase in number of Afghan returnees is also anticipated, which will, as you can imagine, further stretch very scarce humanitarian supplies. Want to flag an upcoming travel, and this time in the Western Hemisphere, by Alexander de Croo, the administrator of the UN Development Program. He is in Haiti for a 2-day visit. While there, he'll meet with the Prime Minister and various government officials, including election officials. UNDP supports, through its work, the elections that are planned for later this year. Mr. de Croo will also meet with security officials, youth entrepreneurs, the private sector, and of course, UN staff serving in the country. The administrator will then go on to Jamaica, where he'll meet with the Prime Minister, industry leaders, and communities that have been impacted by Hurricane Melissa. Before heading back to New York on Friday, we'll provide an update on the trip. I do have a quiz for you today, because we did get money. This is the only country in Central America not to have Spanish as its official language, and also, interestingly, it has no international fast food chains. Belize, exactly. We thank our friends in Belmopan for their full payment to the regular budget. We are up to 74, and I will take some questions. Pam, yes.
Yes, haven't gotten the quiz. That may be a first. No, it wasn't. Anyway, so is the Secretary General in any way meeting with the First Lady of the United States, or has he spoken with President Trump about the Iran conflict?
He has not spoken to President Trump. He will, however, have a brief. He will greet the First Lady before her
Stakeout.
before she goes to the Security Council. Yep.
Thank you.
No problem. Edie.
Thank you, Steph. You said that the Secretary General's main goal now is to try and find a way out of the war in Iran. Is the United Nations aware of any ongoing diplomatic efforts to end the war?
We're not aware of any direct talks between the United States and the Islamic Republic of Iran. We all know. I mean, I think you've seen the public comments by Oman. We would like to see a return to the table and a return to diplomacy.
And on Gaza, with the borders closed, and obviously no food, medicine, or anything else, fuel getting in, how many days does the UN have supplies already in Gaza for? Are we talking about days, weeks?
No, I mean, as you know, I think this question has come up repeatedly over the last 3 years when there is a complete blockade. There is an amount of aid already in. Let me put it bluntly, when the doors are shut, we obviously stretch whatever we have to make it last longer. So I don't want to put a number to it. What is disruptive is that we had put in place a kind of a regular, predictable flow of supplies into Gaza, and now that has been completely disrupted. Yes, please.
Thank you so much. The Secretary General, contrary to diplomatic norms in UN, did not issue even a condolence message after the assassination of the Supreme Leader of Iran. Why was no message issued? What's the Secretary General's position on this matter? And my second question, in the ongoing military aggression by the United States and Israeli regime against Iran, hospitals and homes have been directly targeted, causing many civilians' deaths, especially children and kids. What is his position on this matter?
I mean, I think on the killing of civilians and notably the attack on the schools, the Secretary General referred to it particularly in his statement to the Security Council. What we want to see is an end to the killings, right? We want to see an end to the fighting and a return a return to negotiations. That's the answer I have for you. Yes, sir.
Thanks, Steph. Perhaps a follow-up. I mean, is there any particular reaction to the targeting of a head of state here? So soon after Venezuela's sitting head of state was removed and arrested and brought to the United States. What is your reaction to the U.S.'s unilateral actions in that regard?
Well, I mean, I think the reaction to the action we've seen by the U.S. and Israel, the Secretary General laid it out very plainly on Saturday, and that remains his position. Abdelhamid.
Follow up on the same topic. I remember Kofi Annan in September 2004, only after 1 year and 6 months, he labeled the war on Iraq as illegal. How long it will take this Secretary General to label this war as illegal?
Abdelhamid, I would encourage you to read thoroughly his statement on Saturday,
Yeah.
his deep concern about the violations of the Charter, of Article 2 of the Charter. So I think you can interpret his words to mean whatever you want to interpret them, but I think they were very, very clear.
Can I interpret them that the Secretary General says it is illegal war?
It is far from me to tell you what to write. Stefano.
Thank you, Stefan. Is a follow-up on the brief meeting that the Secretary General will have with the First Lady. Now, the First Lady is not just coming here to a visit, but she's going to actually preside the Security Council on a meeting that I believe is called Children, Technology, and Education in Conflict. Children, technology. I mean, in Iran, if I understand, there was in the attack on Saturday, a school was hit where, I mean, it's declared that more than 100 people, several children died. So does the Secretary General is going to talk, instead of just welcoming her, but just trying to talk with the President of the Security Council about this issue?
It is meant to be a greeting. It is not a meeting. He will be there when she arrives. He will greet her. She will be then on her way. I would encourage you to wait and read what Rosemary DiCarlo will say in the open meeting on behalf of the Secretary General.
Very
Yes,
good. Just
yes.
a follow-up on another thing is the ambassador, the Israeli ambassador, on Saturday on X, he wrote that what the Secretary General reaction to the attack was shameful. Any comment on that?
What do you want me to comment? I mean, I'm not here
Well,
to comment on people's comments. Like I told,
That's the Israeli ambassador.
But like I told Abdelhamid, the Secretary General says what he says. He says it very openly. I think using very clear words. Let people say what they want. We stand by
But it's
what
not
we
people,
say.
that's
The
the
Secretary
Israel.
General, I'll tell you what, the Secretary General was not ashamed of what he said. Yes, ma'am. And then-
Damiela from Paz Blue. Secretary General and other reports said 2 schools were impacted in the U.S.-Israeli strike on Iran. There have been reports that UAE have closed schools. Bahrain too have closed schools following retaliatory attack on those countries. Can you give any sort of background as to how this conflict is affecting children and their schooling in the region?
Very negatively, and I would encourage you to look at what UNICEF put out. But obviously, whenever there are bombings, air raids, or threats as such, schools are closed. Now, this could have an impact of just a few days, and things will get back to normal. This could last longer. We don't know, but you just have to see the impact of conflict on kids in Gaza, where for almost 3 years they haven't had real formal schooling. The impact of conflict and other restrictions put on them in Afghanistan. Look at Sudan. How can children be expected to learn in an open conflict where refugee camps are being droned, when people are being killed? It's shameful. Yes, sir.
Steph, you mentioned at the top how Secretary General hasn't spoken with President Trump yet. Over the weekend, we've seen examples of reporters just calling him directly, whether that's the New York Times or CNN. Why hasn't the Secretary General spoken with President Trump when he's put out such a strong statement?
Diplomacy works a little more formally than reporting. Gabriel.
Thank you, Steph. Israel has said that they've closed the borders to Gaza because it is unsafe given the current situation. If Israel was to open the borders today, would the UN be able to get aid into Gaza?
I mean, if crossings are open, we get aid in. If people allow us to bring aid in, we get aid in.
So even under the current situation, you would be able to work and bring
The only
aid
thing
in.
that we need are for gates to be unlocked.
And on the Secretary General, if I can get one more, on Saturday in his remarks to the Security Council, he said military action carries the risks of igniting a chain of events that no one can control. Are we at that point now?
Well, we are at a risk where there is zero room for miscalculation. Alex.
Thanks, Steph. Firstly, quick follow-up. You've mentioned that the Secretary General had several contacts. That's Qatar plus Oman, right? That's
Yes, and the ambassadors to the UN of the Gulf Cooperation Council.
not the U.S. ambassador.
No, Gulf Cooperation
All right.
Council,
Secondly,
which I don't think the U.S. is a member.
what about the UN team on the ground in Iran? Have you been in touch?
Yes, we've been in touch with them. I mean, I was on a call with them today. Everybody, thankfully, is safe and sound. They're obviously we're very concerned for our Iranian colleagues on the ground, and frankly, we're concerned for our UN colleagues everywhere. I mean, our Israeli UN colleagues, our Palestinian UN colleagues, the ones in the Gulf. They've all had to take precautions to make sure they stay safe.
And the last one, if I may, has anyone from the United Nations been at this site where school was hit? Like just to verify.
No, I'm not aware. I'm not aware that we have.
All right, thank
but
you.
if that changes, I'll let you know. Yes, Pan, and then 1 second. Go ahead, Pan.
Thank you, Steph. In his statement on Saturday morning, the Secretary General condemned the military escalation in the Middle East. And in her speech in the afternoon, he condemned explicitly the strikes. So what's the consideration for the revised wording?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Oh, in the morning, he condemned the military escalation. And in the afternoon, he condemned the strikes by the United States and Israel, and the subsequent strikes by Iran.
Well, I mean, I think as the day progressed, the situation got a little clearer.
Thanks, Stéphane. The Secretary General on Saturday expressed concern about this conflict widening. We're now hearing from France, the UK, that they'll take defensive measures. France saying they'll help Gulf countries defend themselves. Just wonder, this kind of coming from many European countries now, if the Secretary General plans to speak with those leaders, if he's particularly concerned about that aspect of this?
Yeah, I mean, he will continue to have contacts, but that's exactly what we mean. I mean, in the points that Gabriel raised of expansion, the risk of miscalculation, that this chain of events is growing, and that's extremely worrying, and that's a lot of part of the issues that the Secretary General has been discussing. Yeah, Noreen.
Thanks, Stéphane. Speaking of who the Secretary General has spoken to, you mentioned that he hasn't spoken to Mr. Trump. Has he spoken to Mr. Netanyahu or anybody from
No,
the
as, we will share, we're trying to be as transparent as possible in terms of the contacts. Madame.
There are reports that Israel is considering a ground offensive in southern Lebanon. And is there a notification mechanism between UNIFIL and Israel? And should there be one, what happens to UNIFIL?
Well, I mean, there is a notification. There is a notification mechanism. There's the trilateral mechanism and hotlines that go from UNIFIL to both the IDF and the Lebanese armed forces. I can't tell you what will happen. We would not want to see any further deterioration. We would not want to see any sort of ground incursion. But you will recall that before there was sort of an understanding for cessation of hostilities, UN peacekeepers, at great risk to themselves, stayed in place. We also note that there was an announcement by the Prime Minister and by the Cabinet in Lebanon for accelerating efforts towards asserting a state monopoly on arms across Lebanon in line with Resolution 1701, which we very much welcome, and we will try to support in any way we can, as we have been to this date. Sinan.
Thank you, Stéphane. I have a question about refugees, actually. What plans does the United Nations have to support refugees fleeing the war in Iran? I mean, for example, they have more than 90 million population in Iran, and is there any coordination between neighboring countries?
Well, I know UNHCR is extremely focused on this right now. As we mentioned, there's also we're prepared and worried about an influx of not only Afghan returnees from Iran to Afghanistan, but possibly also movements of people. This is a region that UNHCR has been very much active in, and they have systems in place, and they are doing whatever they can to prepare.
Very quick follow-up, if you don't mind. Does the Secretary General recommend or suggest to neighboring countries to open their border for refugees?
Look, every country should do whatever it can to help people who are fleeing danger and who are fleeing war. Yes, Madam.
Yes, thank you. So the U.S. officials say they believed there has a threat and they have taken military action against Iran. So under the UN Charter, is that long enough to justify the use of force?
Look, I would refer you to what the Secretary General said about Article 2 in the Charter in his speech on Saturday. Yes, Ahmed.
Thank you, Steph. A follow-up, if I may, from my previous colleague's question. On the death of the Ayatollah, I recall the Secretary General saying to the Security Council on Saturday, quote, "Several high-ranking officials have reportedly been killed, including, according to Israeli sources, Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, who I'm not in a position to confirm the situation." Now that the report is confirmed, is the Secretary General ready to give a specific statement on the death of the Ayatollah, similar to how he gave a specific statement when Maduro was captured?
We do not want to see any more killings, whether targeted or otherwise. Madame.
On Lebanon, given the situation in Lebanon and hundreds and of thousands of people being displaced, do you have any information that you can share with us from your colleagues on the ground there regarding people fleeing?
No, I don't have anything new for today on movements of people in Lebanon. But again, in Lebanon, we have quite a large UN, not only political and peacekeeping, but humanitarian presence, and I know they're working with the Lebanese authorities in doing whatever they can to prepare and assist. Sherwin.
I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the expanding humanitarian consequences, particularly when there are wars, right? On an already overstretched humanitarian community, what does scenario planning look for the Tom Fletchers and the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs? How do you plan for this moment?
Well, we planned by having had contingency plans already in place. I mean, the impact here is multifold, right? You could have, obviously, a humanitarian impact in Iran, right? And we're already seeing the killings of civilians in other countries in the Gulf. What is particularly worrying as well is the closure of airspace. And you know, the UN has humanitarian hubs in the Gulf, notably in the UAE. A lot of our humanitarian goods move through that. So it could very well have an impact on our operations in Africa, in Asia, and other parts of the world. We're already talking about a humanitarian system which is extremely stretched and heavily heavily underfunded. And this is an issue, I mean, I was just talking to our humanitarian colleagues a few minutes ago that they're worried about, and they're looking at what the impact will be on our logistics operation. I mean, the UN has a tremendous logistics operation, not only humanitarian, as well as peacekeeping. And when critical waterways are closed, when airspace is closed, it can have an impact pretty quickly. Abdelhamid, then Stefano, and then we'll stop.
Maybe it's a technical question. Does the UN consider the Grand Ayatollah as the head of the state of Iran or the elected president?
No, so according to the every permanent mission, as you know, provides us with information, information with who the head of state is and who the foreign minister is. And for Iran, the head of state is the president, not the supreme leader.
So, if the president is killed, then the UN will lower the flag to half-mast, the way they did when Raisi was killed, right?
That is, I mean, there are standard procedures for when head of states.
So when it comes to Khamenei now, they don't have to lower the.
As I said, for us, the procedure is very well laid out in terms of head of states and foreign minister. Signor Vaccaro.
Grazie, Stefan. President Trump Saturday told the Iranian people to take over their government. This was kind of the same was repeated today by the Secretary of Defense in his press conference. Does the Secretary General have any advice for the Iranian people in this moment? I'm talking about the civilians, what they should do.
Look, we want to make sure that civilians in Iran are safe. That is our primary concern. Okay. Thank you all. See you tomorrow. Maybe I'll see you this afternoon.